Hi there, Nigel Saunders here of KW Bonsai. Today we're going to answer the question, how do I keep my bonsai small? I have two Ficus religiosas here. One I want to grow as a very small bonsai, and the other one is more of a small to medium size bonsai. So my intention with this tiny Ficus religiosa is to keep it as a small bonsai tree. I don't want to grow it, larger. I want to keep it kind of this size and just refine it. Plants need to grow to stay healthy. So how do I let the tree grow but still keep it small? One of the techniques to keep a tree small lies in the growth patterns of the tree itself. When a branch is young like this, if I were to prune it here, it will die back to the first leaf node, and then it'll sprout a new branch coming out there. As a branch gets older, it starts to get woody, and it gives me the ability to cut the branch anywhere along the woody part, and new growth will emerge around the cut point. It won't die back to a first leaf node. I can prune this tree down to almost any height, and it will sprout branches and grow. So I have to pick a height that I want the tree at. So in this case, we're going to keep some of this branching. So I'm going to prune it off about here, like there. And from this cut point, because it's a woody branch, I'll get all kinds of new shoots growing around on that branch. It won't die back to a leaf node. It'll sprout everywhere. This operation is hard to do because you prune off all your nice leafy growth, and the plant looks pretty bare for quite a while. But eventually, all the new growth starts to come back in, and it looks even better than before. This Ficus microcarpa is a good example of this procedure. In the last video, I reduced the height, doing some hard pruning on some of the woody branches, and the result is I got growth exploding all over the tree. So then I can further select branches. I can reduce the height more down to some of these other branches that have grown. It gives me a lot of new foliage that I can work with to develop the tree further. I'm going to continue cutting down my medium-sized Ficus religiosa now. So here we go. Again, I want to create an upright broom-style tropical canopy on this tree. I'm going to go hard back, cutting it hard to there. One more branch. We'll go off to here. Actually, we're going to go back further. Take all the foliage off. There we are. I've finished pruning the tree, reducing the height from quite tall back to a medium-sized bonsai. So this tree will sprout new growth all over, and then we'll work with that new growth to refine the tree in future. So stay tuned. We'll do an upcoming video on this Ficus religiosa and see what happened to this pruning operation. Another technique to keep your size down on your bonsai tree is just regular maintenance type pruning. When a branch grows and gets 6 to 8 pairs of leaves on it, it's got enough vigor that you can then prune it back to the first 2 pairs of leaves. You can see in this branch that the first pair of leaves are quite tiny. And then as the branch grows, it gains vigor, and you start getting into some big, huge leaves. So maintenance pruning, we'll prune it back from our 6 to 8 pairs of leaves down to our first 2 using directional pruning to here. This branch is also strong enough for pruning, so I'm going to take it off to here, like that. The other branches on this tree don't have enough vigor to prune back yet. There's our small Ficus religiosa pruned back to size. I have a small jade tree here too that I want to reduce in height. It's getting too tall. I'm going to be doing some hard pruning on it. So if I rotate the tree around to the side, you can see I'm dividing into two here. So I'm going to take this whole branch off. So we'll cut that right here, making almost a flush cut. There. So there's our flush cut. You can see the large wound on the tree that will heal over nicely in future. I have some cuts on the jade here that aren't very flush that I'm going to fix up. Pruning scars on a jade do give the tree character, but I don't like the way it bulges out here. So I'm going to cut it off flush and maybe carve the wound a bit. So we'll take a slice off of there. In order to make this cut flush, you can use concave pruners, you can use a carving tool, and I like to use my fingernail. Here's some carving with the tool, which just gets everything nicely flush. And here's my favorite technique, my fingernail. And I just dig into the tree, and you just carve it away with your finger till the wound's flush, and that cut will turn woody and it'll heal over so it just blends in with the trunk nicely. We've reduced the height somewhat, but I've still got a ways to go. I want to prune this new growth down. Before you do any hard pruning on your jade trees, it's important that the soil is fairly dry. If you have a wet soil and you do hard pruning to the top, the soil will stay wet and it could rot your roots. So let your soil dry out before you do your hard pruning on your jade plants. I like the growth up top. It divides from 1 into 2 and 2 into 4. So our next operation is to get that 4 to divide into 8. So I'm going to prune the top back to the woody part, leaving hardly any leaves. I'm going to leave 2 on here. I'll prune this back to here, and this back fairly hard to here. There's my jade reduced in height, and you'll notice as you reduce the height of a tree, it makes the trunk look thicker and more mature. The next tree I'm trying to keep small is my Ficus microcarpa cutting. This cutting is about 12 years old. It was cut from my one that I grew from a seed. And I also want to keep the height down on it. So really there's only one main branch here that's growing out of control with too much vigor, and that's that back one. So let's prune that one back. And I'll use directional pruning and just snip it off. The rest can be left to grow for a while until they get, about 6 to 8 pairs of leaves. Pruning your bonsai is just one of the techniques that keeps your tree small. The other part lies within the roots. Both these trees were repotted this summer, and you can see on this Ficus religiosa, the roots are growing out the drainage holes in the bottom of the pot and doing very nicely in the open air. This tree too has roots growing out of the bottom of the pot and growing along the table. With a small tree in a small pot, it's very important to always check on your roots, that you're growing a nice even radial root base. You don't want one root taking off in thickness and providing all the vigor to the tree. You want your roots to grow evenly around the trunk to keep your trunk round and the vigor symmetrical going up the tree. Even though these trees were just root pruned and potted midsummer this year, it's time to root prune and repot them again. I'm going to start with the Ficus religiosa in the small pot. So the first operation, I'm going to remove the tree from the pot. So I'm going to push up on my drainage hole here. And here it comes. We'll just gently remove it. You can see in the 6 months the roots have grown really well in the soil. It's held together in a nice solid brick. So it's time to root prune and repot. Even though this tree's in a very small pot, you can still see some of the surface roots on the soil, and that's important to develop. It'll give this little tree a look of a big tree. I'm going to start by raking the roots out from the center of the tree outwards in a radial pattern. Starting at the top of the tree, and then we'll flip it over and work from the bottom. Looks like I have a nice set of radial roots here. On this side especially, and this side they're developing. Now I'll work from the bottom of the tree, remove our drainage screen here, and comb from the center, raking outwards. An advantage of tiny trees is that they only make a tiny mess when you repot them, which is kind of important when I'm doing it inside here. So you can see there's the woody part of the cutting below here where we cut almost all the roots off when I repotted in summer. So they've grown in really nicely. Next I want to create a flat root base on the bottom and have my roots, my surface roots, flow from the trunk into the soil. So I'll remove anything crossing in the center that can't be raked out, like that root and this one, keeping my radial surface roots. That looks pretty good from the bottom. Then I'll go up top and start combing out my surface roots, getting them all organized before we do a root prune. There they're combed out, and I'll just give them a spray to keep them moist, and I'll start root pruning, just cutting around the edges to get rid of the longer, more vigorous roots, and that will keep my root base even and balanced, so one root doesn't gain too much vigor and start taking over compared to all the others. We want to grow our root base out evenly. So that's fairly even now. I'm going to give the pot a good clean, get rid of any lime deposits on it, any dirt, and give it a nice scrub down. I've got the pot all cleaned up, so we're ready for planting. This little pot was sent to me by Gary in Houston, Texas, so again I say thanks. So the first thing we want to do is test fit the tree in the pot. So as you can see, our surface roots are going to overhang the lip of the pot. So I've got to pick the front of the tree, pick the front of the pot, and then trim the roots so they're not touching the edge of the pot, so they've got a little bit of room to grow. So the front of the tree is about here, and the front of the pot is this side. So let's see how it fits. I'll need to do some pruning at the back here. So I'll have to take some roots off the back of the tree. So even though this pot is very small, I still have to keep my nice surface roots growing to make this tree look like a giant tree. That's getting closer to fitting in the pot, but I still have a little more pruning to do. not bad. I need a little more off the front here. Still a little long on the front, because there's not much room from the roots to the edge of the pot. There we go. That'll do. I've placed my drainage screen over the hole in the bottom of the pot, and I'll fill it partially with soil. I'm thinking about that full will be good. Then I'll carefully place the tree in the pot, trying to get all my roots sorted out so they're nice and radial. And I'll check the height of the tree also. So the height of the tree looks pretty good. I can fill it in with soil now. Okay, so I'm going to use my little spoon, fill in around the roots. Again, because the roots are very flat and radial, you don't have to worry about working the soil in too much, because all the roots will be in contact nicely. Having the roots fine in a nice radial pattern without, large thick roots helps keep the tree in good health without having too much vigor. So it gets a small amount of vigor from the roots, but it's evenly distributed up the trunk. So you can grow a nice crown on a small tree. If you had a thick root base with, maybe one thick root over this side and nothing over here, all the vigor is going to come up one side of the tree. You're going to get thick, rapid growth on one branch, and the rest of the tree will be, small, weak growth. So having a radial root base around the tree really helps develop all parts of the tree evenly, and your trunk flare at the base evenly, and you get a nice, good ring of radial surface roots in future as they develop thicker and thicker. So root pruning is part of miniaturizing your bonsai tree. I'm going to give the tree a water. I'm just going to start by misting it gently. We'll start watering it a little more heavily. There is a little bud growing on the base of the trunk here. I'll probably rub it off. I don't think I'll ever use that, but it is nice to know that, trees will back bud. Okay, so that's well watered. I can put that back on the bench in the plant room here and let it grow again. The last technique for keeping your bonsai tree small that I'll talk about is the placement and care of your tree. If your tree is placed in full sun, the leaf size reduces, the growth gets more compact and tighter, and the soil will dry out quicker. This will help miniaturize your tree. If the tree is in a plant room like this, where it's humid, it's warm, the tree grows large leaves because there's not a lot of light. I just have natural light coming in the windows. So your leaves get larger, your growth gets coarser. So that affects the look of your tree. In a northern climate like this, there's not much you can do about it in the winter. You're forced to keep the trees indoors. So much of that new growth, you try and control it as much as you can, but a lot of it will have to get removed and replaced with finer summer growth. To keep your tree small, you can restrict water a bit. You don't want to reduce watering and fertilizing to the point where you're endangering the health of the tree. You want to keep your tree healthy, but you can reduce the watering and fertilizing to the point where the tree is staying healthy but not growing excessively. So that's another technique that helps keep your small trees small. When I repotted this tree this summer, I piled the soil up higher than its display kind of height to keep these new surface roots forming moist and in the soil. So I'm dying to scrape it away and have a look at what the surface roots are doing in this pot. So let's do that now. So here I go. I'll just start at the center and rake outwards. Some of these roots may have to be removed, these ones that have grown in the air, but we'll see. So the soil level's getting down. Should be even or slightly below the lip of the pot. There we go. We'll do some cleanup work to that. Now I'm going to remove any roots that are too high in the soil. They could be, replanted deeper, sort of as aerial surface roots on the tree. But I think at this point in time, I don't need them yet. If I develop these into aerial roots hanging down, they'll probably grow too thick in relationship to the trunk. So I think I'll leave the aerial roots for later on in the tree's life, when it's closer to a finished tree. So for now, I'm going to prune them off. So here I go. Just cut them flush. Where they go into the soil, we'll just cut them to remove the roots and clean up the surface of our soil. There's one at the back here I want to remove. That was a fairly thick one. That's looking better. It exposes the flare at the base of the tree. Just cleaning it up. I think that'll do for today. It's easy to grow a tree bigger, but all the techniques that come into growing a bonsai are all about keeping a tree small. That's it for today. So Nigel Saunders of KW Bonsai. Do something green today. Try your public transport out. If you don't experience what it's like to ride on a bus or a train, you'll never know what the problems are or the good points, so you can fix them in the future. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.